Well, joining me now from London is Ian Dunt. He's the editor-in-chief of politics.co.uk and author of Brexit, What the Hell Happens Now? And also from London, Ben Harris-Quinney. He's the chairman of conservative think tank, the Bow Group. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ben, I'm guessing you're not too keen on this process that's been occurring so far with both the High Court and the Supreme Court.
Well, yes and no. I'm not keen on it because I think it's a very clear attempt by the people that launched the challenge to vexate the democratic will of the British people over Brexit. I am keen on it, actually, because what almost everyone has missed about this case is that it doesn't actually it's not only relevant to Brexit. The question that is being asked in the Supreme Court is not should the United Kingdom leave the European Union or not. The question is who is sovereign in the United Kingdom to make decisions. And actually, I would quite like Parliament to be able to hold the executive of our government to account to the maximum extent possible. Because this case will set a precedent that will affect things like the decision to go to war in Iraq, the ability of the Prime Minister to make unilateral executive decisions. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think the government of any colour needs to be held to account by Parliament. So it might be the case that this proceeding, even though it was initiated to vexate the will of the British people, ends up improving our democracy.
Okay. Ian, do you think that this process was initiated to vexate the will of the people?
No, it wasn't. It was initiated so that there was a degree of scrutiny about the Brexit process. I very much welcomed your other guests' sort of comments on parliamentary sovereignty. That is entirely correct. I don't quite know why we would challenge the aims and the motives and the principles of the people that brought this case. As they're going, I mean, ultimately what has happened here is that as soon as the Brexit vote took place, it's a very vague vote. I mean, you can leave the EU in any number of ways, for instance, by staying in the single market or the customs union, and you can do it one way or another. You have to trigger Article 50. And in that process, the government has tried to amass a tremendous amount of executive power to itself, not just in triggering Article 50, but also in the kind of Brexit that it is going to deliver. This is a very common trend. You very often see it whenever a government goes out there and says, we understand the will of the people, we symbolize the patriotic spirit. Usually what they're doing is trying to get you to confuse the interests of the country with the interests of the government. And this case, if it is won against the government, would actually do an awful lot to limit their ability to do precisely that.
So Ben, it will defang the executive powers of the government and restore, as you said, that sovereignty to Parliament. So you'd be happy with that, right?
Well, I think on that issue, Ian and I are both in agreement. The reason I question the motives is that every single person that has brought this motion is from the Remain camp. It's being funded by the Remain camp. It's quite clearly an attempt to vexate the will of the British people. And you know, I oppose them for their motives, but they may accidentally, rather than intentionally, improve British democracy. What these people don't understand, what none of these people don't understand, is they're very much like a Japanese chap on a deserted Pacific island in the 1950s, still fighting the Second World War. It's over. This country is leaving the European Union, and there's not really any such thing as a hard or soft Brexit. And especially on the issue of free movement, if Theresa May makes a deal with Brussels that keeps the United Kingdom in the Schengen plus the free movement zone, that will be the end of her political career. The reason that Brexit happened is for 20 years, 77% of this country has been ignored over their views on immigration. And if you do that, eventually you'll build up a head of steam that will explode. And that's really what happened. Okay, there are a lot of other issues in the mix as well.
Ian,
and of course,
let me bring in Ian here. Ian, we're trying to sort of, we're all guessing about the intentions of the petitioners. But let me ask you, Ian, you don't have any hope whatsoever that Brexit in any way, shape or form will be overturned, do you?
It won't be by this case. All this case does is trigger a parliamentary vote as to whether you trigger Article 50. There is still a chance that Brexit will be stopped, yeah. So, I mean, this is the confusion. Your other guest is very confused about a series of matters, some of them factual and some of them about opinion. One of them is this idea that Brexit has already happened. I mean, Brexit has not already happened. There are 2.5 years in
No,
which
I didn't say it's
potentially be
actually
stopped,
already
or
happened.
The point I'm making
is that
the
it's
way
going
that this
to happen.
will
It's inevitable.
operate is that at almost any point over the next 2.5 years, if there was enough of a public movement against Brexit, if the economic circumstances were severe enough, if we saw a continuing decline of sterling or of employment in this country, a severing of our trade relationships in a way that looked like it would cause severe damage to the lifestyles of the people of Great Britain, there may well be a swing against Brexit. There's still time for that. What's intriguing is that supporters of Brexit are so nervous about what they have engaged upon that they're very keen to pretend that this is not the case. But I have to say that factually, and also morally and politically, it is the case.
Okay, so Ben, Ian is suggesting that there might already be some sort of buyer's remorse, and maybe if it went to a referendum again, we might not be so sure about the results?
Well, as I say, these people, the liberal metropolitan establishment, if you like, their day is done. I spoke at a debate at the Third Way on the Third Way at the London School of Economics last night, which is where the Third Way originated from, Anthony Giddens' thinking, and everyone in the debate while we disagreed on many issues agreed that the era of the Third Way is over. Brexit hasn't happened yet. I completely agree with Ian on that. What I'm saying is it will happen. I can guarantee that, just like Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. And all these people sitting in London saying, oh, it's terrible, it can't happen. You know, the people have got it wrong, the people don't understand. The people understand very well indeed. They've had enough of third-way politics. They've had enough of centrism across Europe and the West. A revolution is sweeping. And because these people have grown up over the last 20 years understanding only third-way politics and the Blairite way of doing things, it's going to be a very, very uncomfortable next decade for them.
Ian, let me ask you about the judges. There's been tremendous scrutiny on those judges in every publication, from the BBC to the left-wing publications to the right-wing publications, profiles on them, what their links to Europe are, what type of people they are, how old they are, what's their family life. Massive scrutiny. How hard is it going to be for the judges to convince the public that they are making this decision based on the law and not on politics?
I mean, these are very, very senior judges. They're very sober people, very sensible people, and they will make their decision based on the law. That's what the first decision was made on, a very sound and a very interesting point of law that defended English freedoms, very ancient English freedoms. And you're quite right. The response from the press and from Brexiters in Parliament and outside, which has been pretty typical of the quite hysterical and deeply shrill emotional response to this process that they've demonstrated, has been to attack them personally, has been to attack the claimants personally, has been an attitude so ferocious in its aggression that there has been death threats against these people, and to try and basically create an even more toxic political environment in which we operate. It will not affect the judge's judgment, but what concerns us is that really further down the line, less confident judicial figures may feel the need to go with the government, always easiest when you come to a case like this, because of the kind of targeted anger, the targeted aggression that we have seen from Brexit supporters towards the judiciary.
Ben, there was targeted anger towards the High Court judges initially when they said, yes, you know, this can go forward and this will go to Parliament. Then the government appealed. If these Supreme Court judges, these 11, rule against the government this time around, are you expecting a similar sort of backlash? We saw the Daily Mail almost smear them. You'd agree that that wasn't very nice.
Well, you're putting words into my mouth there. I think the Daily Mail is a great newspaper, which is why it's the most popular newspaper in Britain. However, essentially I agree with everything that Ian has just said. If you watch the rolling coverage of the Supreme Court decision, which is a great privilege granted to us as free citizens, we can watch our laws being made and our laws then being challenged and legal precedents being set at the highest level. If you watch that and you are someone who believes passionately in democracy, I think you will be heartened by what you see. This is an extremely high-level, intelligent exchange between people at the very top of the British legal system. which has many flaws, many flaws indeed. However, in terms of the global leaderboard, this is still a great country in terms of justice. And so I watch these proceedings with concern and with suspicion over the motivations for this case being launched, but I also watch them with great pride in my country. And of course, I don't think that members of the judiciary should have death threats thrown at them. That's totally despicable, and I hope that the people responsible are held to account for that vexatious attempt to challenge the British democratic process, just as I hope the people that are attempting to ignore and silence the silent majority in Britain are held to account for their stance as well.
Okay, I'm really interested to see
Sorry,
how the judges...
Can I come back on that? Because that was a very dubious statement
20
you just
seconds,
made.
please, Ian, because we are out of time. So 20 seconds.
Well, I mean, the problem is, to compare someone who's threatening violence against someone with someone who's saying, well, they want to rerun a referendum, is really quite far off the level and bizarre.
No, there's been threats of violence on both sides. What I'm saying is I don't endorse any attempt to vexate the fair and just process and the process of British democracy. There's obviously a sliding scale. At the top of that scale, you've got awful things like death threats, and at the bottom of the scale, you've got things like legal challenges. And I do recognise absolutely the difference between them. I agree with Ian that the environment is toxic. I'm just saying that I don't endorse any attempt to subvert the will of the British people.
Ian, does that sound reasonable to you?
Whether it is outrageous and violent, or whether it is sober and slow.
Okay, Ian, are you satisfied with that?
I mean, it's an improvement on the first statement, but it still seems a completely bizarre comparison to have made. There haven't been any violent threats made against Brexit people. I mean, you get your occasional shouting on
That's absolutely
Twitter.
not true. That's absolutely not true.
I mean, this was something that happened in court that the judges actually had at the beginning of the case to warn this cannot happen or else there's violence against people taking place in this courtroom.
Nigel Farage receives death threats on a weekly basis. You do realise that. You do realise
no, that's fine.
that,
It's just
that
the distinction is that actually there was a warning from judges in this case that because of the extent of press vitriol, there had been threats to the security of the people involved in the case. I mean, it should be very easy to say we condemn this.
But I also consider threats to elected representatives in this country
that someone said on Twitter at some point as an attempt to rerun a referendum.
No. Look. Any threat to any citizen of the United Kingdom, whether they are a Supreme Court judge or whether they are someone who is unemployed and on benefits, is totally unacceptable.
Okay.
This idea that you shouldn't be threatening Supreme Court judges, but it's not as serious to threaten Nigel Farage, is absolutely outrageous.
Okay, you both made your point. Unfortunately, I've got to put a lot on it because we are out of time. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Ian Dunt and Ben Harris-Quinney, thank you very much for joining us.